Welcome to Life Stories. What if everything you thought you knew about family, wealth, and success was a lie? Imagine standing at the peak of a perfect life, wealth, status, a fairy tale wedding, and realizing that nothing about it feels right. Olivia Montgomery had it all, but the night of her wedding, everything changed. The truth she'd buried deep inside her began to surface, and it was more powerful than anything money could buy. Tonight, she had a choice: stay in the world she knew, or step into the unknown, confronting the people she loved most with the truth they were too blind to see. This is the story of a woman who was willing to lose everything to finally find herself. Let's take a look at what happened that night and how a single decision can change everything. The sun hung low in the sky, casting a golden hue over the sprawling estate that seemed to stretch endlessly beneath the endless expanse of blue. The grand garden was meticulously curated, each row of roses standing at attention, their white petals shining in the late afternoon light. It was the kind of event that belonged in magazines, elegant, pristine, and entirely out of reach for most. Olivia Montgomery, the beautiful bride, stood at the center, her delicate lace gown shimmering as she exchanged soft whispers of love with her soon-to-be husband, Jason Carter. The buzz of high society surrounded them, gossips dressed in designer gowns, businessmen and women sipping champagne, their lives measured by numbers on a balance sheet. To everyone in the room, this was a celebration of a perfect love story. Olivia, the privileged daughter of an influential family, and Jason, a brilliant entrepreneur who had risen from nothing to build an empire. But there was something hidden beneath the surface, a truth no one seemed to notice. It was a truth that only a few would soon uncover, and when they did, it would shake the foundation of everything they thought they knew. Grace Carter arrived quietly, stepping out of a sleek black car with the help of her grandson, Jason. Her silver curls framed a face that held the grace of a queen, though time had etched lines of wisdom across it. She wore a modest navy blue dress, far removed from the high-end couture around her. Yet, it was not her clothing that made her stand out. It was the calm dignity with which she carried herself. Her eyes scanned the crowd, warm and welcoming, as if seeing the guests not for their wealth, but for the people they truly were. This day had been a long time coming, a moment she had been waiting for, to see her grandson marry the love of his life. But the glances she received from Olivia's family were less than warm. Victoria Montgomery, Olivia's mother, stood near the entrance with a glass of wine in her hand, eyeing Grace as if she were nothing more than a speck of dust. Victoria's voice was barely a whisper, but Grace heard it clearly. "Some people don't understand the difference between formal and casual attire," she sneered, just loud enough for a few guests to overhear. A couple of polite laughs followed. Grace didn't flinch. She had endured far worse in her life, and this was nothing compared to the battles she had fought. Richard Montgomery, Olivia's father, nodded at Grace's direction, but not once did he offer a handshake. He acknowledged her existence only as a courtesy, a mere flicker in the sea of high society guests. The rest of the Montgomery clan followed suit, exchanging glances and subtly shifting their conversations whenever Grace approached. Jason noticed the tension, his jaw tightening as he looked at his grandmother. But Grace, ever calm, placed a reassuring hand on his arm. "It's all right, dear," she murmured. "Some lessons take time." And as the evening wore on, those lessons began to unfold. At one point, when Grace reached for a canapé from a passing tray, Victoria's lips curled into a barely concealed grimace. It was a small moment, a fleeting gesture, but to Grace it was as familiar as the rhythm of her own breath. The dismissive glances, the subtle distancing, it was all part of the same old dance. Yet, Grace remained unfazed. She had faced worse. Far worse. The celebration continued, a glittering showcase of wealth and privilege. Champagne glasses clinked as laughter rang out, but beneath the joy, there was an undercurrent of arrogance that even the music couldn't drown out. The Montgomerys, self-assured and basking in the glow of their social standing, seemed to be unaware of the shift happening just beneath the surface. Grace sat at the edges of the reception, almost invisible to those who passed her by, while they fawned over guests with far less substance than her. It was as though she were an outsider in a world that had long forgotten the value of true character. But there was one man who noticed. William Adams, a businessman in his 60s, had watched the night unfold from a distance, his sharp eyes taking in every detail. He saw how the Montgomerys dismissed Grace, how they played their games of status, and how they failed to recognize her for what she truly was. He had known Grace for years. She wasn't just a grandmother, she was a force, and he was about to show the rest of them just how much of a force she truly was. At the height of the evening, the event coordinator stepped up to the microphone. Her voice rang through the air, crisp and clear. "Ladies and gentlemen, it is my great honor to introduce to you a very special guest tonight, an individual whose contributions to business, philanthropy, and social change have left an indelible mark on this country. Please join me in welcoming our esteemed guest of honor." The crowd stirred, a ripple of excitement flowing through the guests. The Montgomerys straightened in their seats, eager to see who could possibly be important enough to warrant such an introduction. They prided themselves on their elite social circle. But this was different. They could feel it. But when William Adams, the distinguished guest, turned and made his way toward Grace Carter instead of the podium, the air went still. The murmur of confusion swept through the crowd as he approached her with a warm smile, and to everyone's shock, bowed his head slightly. "Madam Carter," he said, his voice reverent, "it's been too long." The room fell silent. Gasps echoed as the name Madam Carter hung in the air. The realization hit the Montgomerys with the force of a tidal wave. William Adams, the billionaire businessman whose name was synonymous with power and influence, was showing Grace Carter more respect than they ever had. And suddenly, the truth about who Grace was began to dawn on them. "William," Grace's voice was smooth, as though she were speaking to an old friend. "You haven't changed a bit." The gasps grew louder as William addressed the crowd. "Many of you know me as a businessman, a philanthropist," he said, his eyes never leaving Grace. "But I wouldn't be where I am today if it weren't for this woman. Grace Carter built an empire from nothing. She shattered barriers and created opportunities where there were none. She's invested in education, in communities, and in lives. And tonight, we honor her." The weight of his words settled over the crowd like a heavy fog. The Montgomerys, who had spent the evening treating Grace as little more than an afterthought, were forced to confront the fact that the woman they had dismissed was not only wealthy and influential, but was, in many ways, the most powerful person in the room. Richard Montgomery's face turned pale, and his confident smirk dissolved into something far more uncomfortable. Olivia, standing nearby, looked from Grace to William and back again, her mouth agape in disbelief. For the first time in years, the Montgomerys felt small. Do you think a person's true worth is revealed in how they're treated, or is it something deeper? How would you feel if someone you once dismissed turned out to be the key to your success and survival? The room was now buzzing with whispers, the excitement and shock reverberating through the guests. Olivia's gaze met Grace's, and for the first time that evening, she saw her grandmother, not as an outsider, but as someone who had built a life worth admiring. As the evening continued, the Montgomerys' veneer of wealth and privilege had been shattered, and the air was thick with the weight of their own realization. What they once considered power now seemed hollow in comparison to the quiet dignity of Grace Carter. But one thing was certain, the night was far from over, and the truth was still unfolding. The room was alive with energy, but beneath the surface, a tension hung in the air like an unspoken truth. As the evening stretched on, the grandeur of the celebration, the clinking of glasses, and the laughter of high society guests failed to mask the unsettling shift that had taken place. The Montgomerys, once so sure of their position at the top of the social ladder, now sat in the heavy silence of their own discomfort. All eyes were on Grace Carter, and in that moment, everything seemed to shift toward her. Olivia stood off to the side, her hand still clutching Jason's, her mind racing. She couldn't shake the image of her mother's face when William had bowed to Grace, or the horrified look in her father's eyes as the truth came crashing down. They had always prided themselves on their wealth and power, on their carefully curated lives, but none of that seemed to matter now. Olivia felt as though she were drowning in their shame, unable to breathe in the atmosphere of her own wedding. Jason's grip on her hand tightened, a silent reassurance, but it did little to calm the storm brewing inside her. She had grown up with these people, these ideals. They had shaped her worldview, told her what was worth pursuing and who was worth associating with. And now, all of that was unraveling. Grace had always been a quiet presence in her life, but tonight, she had become a symbol of everything Olivia's family had failed to recognize. The truth was a hard pill to swallow, and Olivia wasn't sure she was ready to face it. As the night wore on, the Montgomerys continued their polite exchanges with the guests, but the weight of the revelation had shifted the tone of the room. Victoria, ever the strategist, tried to salvage the situation by fawning over the other guests, but her efforts were met with an uncomfortable silence. The Montgomerys, who had once walked through rooms with the assurance of royalty, now felt like strangers in their own lives. Their world, one built on status and the subtle destruction of anyone they deemed beneath them, was crumbling. Grace sat at her table, quietly sipping her wine, her gaze occasionally meeting that of a guest who had come to offer their apologies. She hadn't gloated, hadn't demanded recognition or respect. Instead, she let the truth speak for itself, as it always did. But Olivia could see it now, the quiet satisfaction in her grandmother's eyes, the knowledge that she had always been more than they gave her credit for. And with that knowledge came a deep, gnawing guilt that settled heavily in Olivia's chest. Olivia excused herself from Jason, needing space to process the whirlwind of emotions swirling within her. She walked toward the balcony, seeking a moment of solitude in the cool night air. The garden below looked beautiful, but it felt distant, like a world she no longer belonged to. The moon hung low in the sky, casting a pale glow over the manicured lawn, and the sounds of the party seemed muffled from this distance. Standing at the edge, Olivia leaned on the railing, her mind in a storm. She had always admired her family's resilience, their sharpness, their ability to thrive in the world of the wealthy elite. They had taught her to hold her head high, to never let anyone see weakness, to always be the one with the power in the room. But now she saw the cracks, the facade that had kept her and them safe for so long. But what had it cost them? Olivia knew the answer now, and the weight of it crushed her. The disregard for people like Grace, the dismissive attitude toward anyone who didn't fit into their perfect little world, it was all part of the same ugly truth. Her family had never cared about the lives they trampled on to get where they were. Grace had always been a reminder of their hypocrisy, a living testament to the idea that wealth wasn't everything. But Olivia had ignored that truth, accepted the world her parents had built, and silenced the voice inside her that told her something was wrong. But tonight, everything had changed. Tonight, she had seen Grace not as the outsider, but as someone who had built a legacy with her own hands, who had fought and clawed her way to the top, not by stepping on others, but by lifting them up. Grace had done more for the world than the Montgomerys ever would, and that realization hit Olivia harder than anything else. Olivia, a voice broke through her thoughts, and she turned to see Jason standing in the doorway, his expression unreadable. "I needed to get some air," she said softly, her voice betraying the turmoil inside her. He stepped closer, his eyes searching hers. "Are you okay?" Olivia shook her head. "I don't know. I don't know what's real anymore, Jason." "You're just overwhelmed," he said, his voice gentle. "It's a lot to take in, but you're not alone in this, Olivia." She turned away, looking out at the garden again. "But what about them? My family? How can I go back to them now, knowing what I know? How can I continue to live in a world where they dismiss people like Grace, people who've done so much more than they ever will?" Jason was quiet for a long moment. "You don't have to live in that world anymore," he said, his voice steady. But it's not about what they've done or haven't done. It's about what you do next, what you stand for. You have the power to change it, Olivia. But you have to decide if you're ready to walk away from everything you've known. Her heart raced as his words hit home. Jason was right. It wasn't just about the Montgomerys. It was about her. It was about who she wanted to be, what kind of person she wanted to become. But could she really turn her back on the life she had been raised in? Could she really walk away from the only world she had ever known? As Olivia stood there, torn between the past and the future, she felt something stir inside her, something stronger than the fear, stronger than the guilt. It was a desire for something more, something real. And for the first time that evening, she made a decision. I have to confront them, she whispered. I have to do this for myself. Jason gave her a reassuring smile. I'll be right beside you. Olivia took a deep breath, feeling a sense of resolve she hadn't known she was capable of. The night was far from over, and so was her journey. The Montgomerys would soon learn that they had underestimated not just Grace, but Olivia as well. Do you think Olivia can truly break away from her family's legacy, or will the weight of tradition pull her back? What would you do if you found yourself in Olivia's shoes, caught between your past and the truth about who you really are? As Olivia walked back into the ballroom, a new determination in her step, the tension in the room seemed to shift once again. The Montgomerys, still reeling from their earlier humiliation, had no idea what was coming next. The storm was far from over. Olivia stood at the threshold of the ballroom, her breath steady, but her heart pounding. The noise from the celebration seemed to fade away as she focused on the task ahead, confronting the family that had shaped her, the family she had always believed was invincible. Tonight, everything was different. She had stepped out of the shadows of their expectations, and now she was about to face them with the truth they had long ignored. Jason walked beside her, his presence a calm anchor in the storm. He knew how much this moment meant to her, how much courage it took for Olivia to step up against everything she had been taught to value. But she wasn't the same woman who had walked into the mansion hours ago. She had been shaken. Yes, but also awakened. Tonight, the Montgomerys would see her for who she truly was. The moment she entered the ballroom, all eyes turned to her. Her family, seated at their familiar positions, appeared startled by her sudden reappearance. Victoria Montgomery, her mother, stood up first, her eyes wide with a mix of disbelief and unease. Richard Montgomery, who had once been the epitome of authority in Olivia's world, sat with his mouth slightly open, clearly unprepared for whatever Olivia had in store. Olivia's gaze swept over them, but she wasn't looking for approval. She was looking for accountability. Olivia, sweetheart, Victoria began, trying to mask the nervousness in her voice. What is it? Are you all right? Olivia took a step forward, her voice calm but firm. I'm fine, Mother, but there's something I need to say. A hush fell over the room. The guests, who had been busy exchanging pleasantries and discussing the latest gossip, sensed that something was about to happen. This wasn't just another polite conversation. This was the moment that would determine whether Olivia would continue to live in the world her parents had created for her, or whether she would step into a new one. She turned to Jason, who gave her a reassuring nod. I'm sorry, Olivia said, her voice steady, but I can't stay silent anymore. Not after everything that's happened tonight. Not after everything I've learned. Richard's eyes narrowed. What are you talking about, Olivia? Olivia inhaled deeply, gathering the strength to speak the words that had been trapped in her heart for so long. I've spent my whole life living in this world, she began, her eyes scanning the faces of her family. A world where success is measured by the size of your bank account and the names on your guest list. A world where people like Grace Carter, my grandmother's friend, are dismissed and ignored because they don't fit your idea of what's important. She paused, her words echoing in the stunned silence that followed. She could feel her pulse quicken, but she didn't falter. I've been complicit in that. I've stood by while people like her were treated as if they were invisible, and I've ignored the truth about what really matters. That's not who I want to be anymore. Victoria's face twisted with frustration, her mask of elegance slipping for just a moment. Olivia, you're being dramatic. Grace may be a nice woman, but she's not the same as us. She doesn't understand the world we live in. Olivia's heart raced at her mother's words, but she didn't back down. No, Mother, you don't understand. Grace has built something with her own hands. She's fought for everything she's achieved, and she's done more for the world than any of us ever will. She's the one who deserves respect, not us. But I've spent my life trying to fit into a world that was built on false ideals, and I won't do it anymore. The silence in the room was deafening. Olivia could feel the weight of her words settling over the Montgomerys, could see the realization dawning on them like a slow tide. Richard sat still, his hands clenched into fists on the table. He had always prided himself on being the one who controlled the room, the one who had the power. But now his power was slipping away, and he didn't know how to react. Grace had been watching from the edge of the room, her calm demeanor never wavering. She had known this moment would come, had known that Olivia would eventually have to face the truth. But it wasn't her battle to fight. This was Olivia's fight, and she had to make her own choice. Olivia's gaze met her grandmother's, and in that moment, she felt the weight of everything Grace had taught her. The dignity, the strength, the quiet courage to stand up and speak the truth, even when the world around you was crumbling. I've made mistakes, Olivia continued, her voice softening but growing in strength. I've ignored the things that truly matter, but not anymore. I won't be part of a family that treats others like they don't count. I won't stand by and watch people suffer for the sake of our reputation. I'm done with all of it. Victoria's face turned red with fury. You're throwing everything away for a woman who has nothing, Olivia? You're choosing to side with someone who has no place in our world? Olivia took a deep breath, her heart heavy, but her resolve unwavering. Yes, Mother, I am. Because it's the right thing to do. Richard stood up abruptly, his chair scraping against the floor. You don't know what you're saying. You can't just walk away from everything we've built, Olivia. You can't throw away your future for some misplaced sense of righteousness. I'm not throwing away my future, Olivia replied, her voice firm. I'm building it the right way. Jason stepped forward, standing beside her. We'll build something better together, Olivia. A future where respect and integrity come before wealth and status. The guests around them were murmuring, some in disbelief, others in awe. The Montgomerys, who had always been the kings and queens of their own little kingdom, were now the ones who were lost. Their empire, built on the illusion of superiority, was crumbling before their eyes. Olivia looked at her family one last time, her heart heavy with a mixture of sadness and relief. She knew what she was about to do would change everything. It would tear apart the life she had always known, the life that had once seemed so perfect. But she was ready, ready to step into the unknown, ready to finally choose her own path. I'm sorry, Olivia said softly, her voice cracking, but I can't stay here any longer. And with that, she turned and walked away from the family that had once meant everything to her. Jason followed, his hand gently brushing against hers as they stepped into the night together. What do you think Olivia's future holds after her bold decision? Will she find peace in her new life, or will the weight of her past continue to haunt her? Do you believe Olivia made the right choice, or should she have stayed and fought for her family's legacy? Thank you for watching this story unfold with us. If you enjoyed it, please leave a 100 in the comments below and share your thoughts on Olivia's journey. Where are you watching from? Don't forget to share this video with your friends, and thank you again for being a part of Life Stories.